You won't believe what happened recently in the world of evangelical Christianity. Dr. Tony Evans, one of the most respected figures in the community, made an unexpected announcement that left his followers in complete shock. For decades, he led Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship in Dallas, Texas, with unwavering commitment, guiding people in their faith and building an empire of spiritual influence. But in a surprising turn of events, he made the decision to step down as the senior pastor of the church, leaving many wondering what could have led to such a monumental change. Dr. Evans, a man who had stood as a pillar of faith for so long, revealed that his resignation was tied to something deeply personal, a past sin that he admitted to but chose not to elaborate on. And here's where it gets really interesting. He didn't say that he had committed a crime. No. Instead, he confessed that his actions fell short of the moral and spiritual standard that he himself had always preached. But the real question on everyone's mind was, what exactly happened? This revelation shocked everyone. Dr. Evans, who had always been the face of integrity, humility, and dedication to his faith, was now openly admitting to a fault that no one expected from him. He stated that though he had not committed a crime, he had failed to judge a situation rightly, which led him to make choices that didn't align with the principles he had taught others. It was a moment of vulnerability that many found hard to reconcile with the man they had looked up to for years. As word spread about his resignation, many of his followers couldn't help but ask, what could this past sin possibly be? Was it something personal, something he did behind closed doors, or was it a moral failure on a more public scale? These questions stirred up a mix of emotions in the community, ranging from disbelief to genuine concern for the pastor's well-being. But the craziest part was that Dr. Evans wasn't hiding away from the truth. No, instead, he openly acknowledged his past mistakes and expressed a strong commitment to healing and restoring himself spiritually. But here's the part that really gets you thinking. Dr. Evans' resignation wasn't just a personal matter. It sent a message to his congregation and the wider community about accountability, repentance, and the importance of owning up to one's actions. He wasn't just stepping away from his duties as a pastor. He was taking time to go through a healing process that would allow him to restore his relationship with God. It was a humbling moment for someone who had spent so many years in a position of spiritual leadership. Dr. Evans's announcement wasn't just a shock to his followers, it was a call to action for anyone who has ever struggled with their own mistakes or sins. It made people think, if Dr. Evans, a leader in the church, can admit to his shortcomings and take steps toward redemption, then maybe we can too. But of course, while many praised him for his honesty, others couldn't help but wonder about the full story behind his decision. What exactly was this sin that had caused such a profound shift in his life? Now, as the world watches, Dr. Evans' decision to step away from his role as the head of the church leaves an open chapter in his life. What comes next? Will he return to the pulpit once his healing is complete, or has this marked the end of his leadership in the church forever? The curiosity surrounding this is intense, and as we continue to uncover more details, it becomes clear that there's more to this story than meets the eye. The twists and turns of Dr. Evans' journey are only just beginning, and the full truth behind his resignation may still be far from fully revealed. Now, as we dive deeper into the mystery surrounding Dr. Tony Evans' resignation, we find ourselves at a crossroads in this story. The world was left hanging with more questions than answers. People couldn't stop asking what exactly led Dr. Evans, a man of such strong faith, to step away from the ministry he built from the ground up. It was a question that seemed to hover over the entire situation, leaving many of his followers feeling unsettled. Dr. Evans, in his statement, had been clear about one thing. He admitted to a past sin, something that had troubled him for a long time. Yet, he made it clear that it wasn't a criminal act, but more of a moral failure, a misstep in judgment. But here's where it gets really interesting. He didn't elaborate on what that sin was. Why not? The more people speculated, the more the mystery deepened. Was it something deeply personal that no one knew about? Or was it a failure in judgment tied to a decision made during his time as a pastor? The silence surrounding this sin only added fuel to the fire, making the entire situation feel like a riddle that no one could solve. What makes the story different, though, is the way Dr. Evans handled his confession. Instead of brushing it off or hiding behind vague statements, he chose to be open about his failure. He didn't try to deflect blame or create excuses. Instead, he embraced the reality of his situation, admitting that he had fallen short of the standards he had set for himself as a leader. In his own words, he said that he was required to apply the same biblical standard of repentance and restoration to himself that he had applied to others throughout his career. This was a rare moment of complete vulnerability, especially for someone in his position. And here's the shocking part. Dr. Evans didn't just announce his resignation. He was choosing to step back for a process of healing and restoration. This wasn't some quick decision made on a whim. No, Dr. Evans' choice to resign came after deep reflection, and according to his statement, it was done with the support of his family and the church elders. The community that had followed him for so long was now rallying behind him, offering their grace and understanding. It was a moment of redemption, not just for Dr. Evans, but for the entire congregation. He was calling on his followers to do something incredibly difficult, to stand by him, even when the path ahead was unclear. But here's where the twist comes in. Dr. Evans wasn't just stepping away from his duties as a senior pastor. He was also confronting something much deeper within himself. This wasn't just about a man failing in a specific moment or making one poor decision. It was about the struggle of facing one's own shortcomings head on. This journey was not going to be easy for him, and it wasn't going to be easy for the people who loved him and believed in him. So why didn't he tell everyone exactly what this sin was? Why leave so much unanswered? Some believe that by not revealing the details, Dr. Evans was preserving the dignity of the people involved or protecting certain aspects of his private life that didn't need to be shared. Others think that perhaps the specific nature of the sin was less important than the act of repentance itself. But whatever the reason, the mystery surrounding his past sin only added to the drama and intrigue of his resignation. Meanwhile, as the world speculated, Dr. Evans wasn't simply sitting back and waiting for the dust to settle. No, he was taking active steps to address the situation and ensure that his departure didn't cause a division within his congregation. He called on his followers to keep their eyes on the bigger picture, to focus on their faith and the teachings of Jesus Christ, even in the midst of this unexpected crisis. This is where it gets interesting again. The message wasn't just about his failure. It was about how we all must confront our flaws and seek redemption, no matter who we are or what we've done. But here's the craziest part. Dr. Evans wasn't stepping away for a brief break or a moment of rest. His resignation was part of a much larger personal journey. It was about healing, restoration, and redemption on a scale that went far beyond the walls of his church. As much as his followers were caught up in the shock of his departure, Dr. Evans was focused on something far more important: the restoration of his relationship with God and the people who had looked to him for guidance. So, what does all this mean for the future of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship? With the church in a state of transition, what role will Dr. Evans play moving forward? Will he return to lead the congregation once he has completed his healing journey? Or is this the end of an era? The questions are many, but one thing is clear. Dr. Evans' resignation marks the beginning of something new, not just for him, but for the entire community. As the world was reeling from Dr. Tony Evans' unexpected resignation, many people found themselves grappling not only with the shock of his decision, but with the personal questions it raised about forgiveness, redemption, and starting over. While his followers were still in the dark about the exact details of his past sin, Dr. Evans had begun a new chapter in his life, one that seemed to shift the focus away from his past mistakes and toward a future filled with healing, restoration, and, surprisingly, love. Destiny took an unexpected turn for Dr. Evans in 2019 when his beloved first wife, Lois Evans, passed away after a long battle with bile duct cancer. The pain of losing her was something that no one could fully understand, not even those closest to him. He shared heartfelt tributes to her, speaking of the deep love and admiration he had for the woman who had been by his side for over 40 years. In fact, Dr. Evans often credited his success and spiritual journey to the support and strength he drew from Lois. She had been a guiding force in his life and ministry, and her death left a void that seemed impossible to fill. However, just 4 years later, in November 2023, Dr. Evans found a new chapter in his life when he remarried Carla Crum. The announcement was met with a mix of reactions, but most were curious about who this new woman was and what role she would play in his life moving forward. Carla was an educator and a volunteer, and she had a passion for supporting widows, children, and uplifting women in ministry, something that clearly resonated with Dr. Evans, given his own struggles and the loss of his first wife. She was not just a partner in marriage, but someone who seemed to share his mission of faith and service. Her personal vision, as described in her church bio, was to help women, especially pastors' wives, embrace their spiritual roles with joy and purpose. But here's where it gets even more interesting. While Dr. Evans was focused on his personal healing, his remarriage symbolized a fresh start, not just in his personal life, but in his journey towards spiritual recovery. He had been through so much, losing his wife, facing his own failures, and now stepping away from the leadership role he had held for so long. Yet, despite all of this, he chose to marry someone who shared his commitment to faith and ministry. It wasn't just about love, it was about rebuilding, starting fresh, and finding strength through partnership and shared values. Carla's role in his life was more than just a supportive spouse. She became a central figure in his journey of healing. She was there by his side, not just as a wife, but as someone who had a deep personal mission that mirrored his own. Her work as a kindness ambassador for a Christian Bible teaching ministry showed her dedication to serving others and supporting those in need. She wasn't just standing by Dr. Evans as he went through his struggles. She was actively involved in his recovery, offering her own wisdom and support, not just to him, but to others as well. In a way, Dr. Evans' remarriage represented a symbol of renewal. Where one chapter of his life had ended in loss, another was beginning with hope. He was no longer the same man who had once stood at the pulpit without any personal doubts or struggles. Instead, he was a man who had faced his own flaws, sought redemption, and was now surrounded by people who helped him on that path. People like Carla, who understood the complexity of grief, healing, and forgiveness. And here's the shocking part. While much of the focus had been on Dr. Evans' resignation and the mystery of his past sin, his remarriage represented a turning point. It was clear that he wasn't just stepping away to retreat into isolation. No, he was moving forward with his new wife by his side, with the same faith that had always driven him, and with a renewed sense of purpose. His decision to remarry wasn't just about finding love again. It was about embracing the future, accepting the past, and believing in the possibility of redemption, not just for him, but for everyone who witnessed his journey. But, of course, the public was still trying to connect the dots between Dr. Evans's personal life and his resignation. Was this part of his healing process, Was marrying Carla a way for him to rebuild his life spiritually, emotionally, and mentally? Or was there something deeper to this decision, something that the public hadn't fully understood yet? As much as Dr. Evans had opened up about his past struggles, the questions around his new life and what it meant for his future in the ministry continued to swirl. As we come to the final chapter in Dr. Tony Evans' shocking journey of redemption, we can't help but reflect on how far he's come and how much further his story still has to go. While the world may have been stunned by his resignation from Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship, the true impact of his decision is not measured in the moments of public shock, but in the quiet, personal transformation that followed. For Dr. Evans, this was never just about stepping away from a leadership position. It was about confronting his past, seeking restoration, and ultimately finding the strength to move forward with faith, humility, and hope. This wasn't just a resignation. It was a statement of accountability and transparency. And while many might have questioned his decision to step down, especially without fully disclosing the nature of the sin he admitted to, Dr. Evans' openness in acknowledging his failure was nothing short of courageous. Instead of trying to protect his image or bury his mistakes, he chose to face them head-on, understanding that in doing so, he was setting an example for others to follow. This is where it gets interesting. Dr. Evans wasn't simply asking for forgiveness. He was showing the power of repentance and the importance of personal growth, even for someone who had spent his life teaching others. But here's where it gets even more powerful. In the wake of his resignation, Dr. Evans didn't disappear from the public eye. No, he continued to serve, to teach, and to encourage. His influence didn't vanish because of a past mistake. In fact, it grew stronger. His message about redemption, healing, and faith resonated deeply with people, not just because of his leadership, but because he was now speaking from a place of experience. His journey became a living example of what it means to overcome hardship, to face your flaws, and to emerge stronger on the other side. The craziest part is that while Dr. Evans may have stepped away from the pulpit, he was not abandoning his mission. He wasn't retreating into seclusion or becoming disillusioned with his faith. On the contrary, he was leaning into his own healing process, supported by his family, the church elders, and his new wife, Carla. This was a man who had seen the lowest points of his life and was now determined to rise again, stronger and more resolute than ever. He was living out the very lessons he had taught for so many years, that faith is not about perfection, but about perseverance. That God's grace is more than enough to heal and restore. But what makes the story truly different is the legacy that Dr. Evans leaves behind. His decision to step down wasn't just a personal one, it was a communal call to action. The people of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship and many others who followed his ministry were now called to reflect on their own journeys of faith. This is where it gets interesting. Dr. Evans' resignation didn't just prompt questions about his personal life, it prompted a deeper conversation about faith, accountability, and the ongoing process of growth and redemption. His story wasn't just about one man's fall from grace. It was about how grace can lift us up, no matter where we are on our spiritual journey. And here's the shocking part. Dr. Evans' departure didn't signal the end of his influence. Instead, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, not just for him, but for everyone who had been touched by his ministry. While some might have thought that his resignation would leave a void, it actually opened the door for something new. A deeper, more authentic kind of leadership that embraced vulnerability and the power of restoration. Dr. Evans may have stepped away from the pulpit, but his legacy of faith, humility, and redemption continues to inspire people to this day. As he continues on his journey of healing and restoration, the future remains uncertain. Will he return to lead Oak Cliff again? Will he continue to inspire others through his personal testimony? The truth is, no one knows. But one thing is for sure, Dr. Tony Evans has proven that no matter how far we fall, redemption is always possible. And his story will continue to be a beacon of hope for anyone who believes in the power of grace and the possibility of second chances. In the end, Dr. Evans' resignation wasn't just a story of failure, it was a story of triumph. It was about how one man's journey through hardship, humility, and faith can teach us all that redemption is real, that healing is possible, and that no matter where we find ourselves, God's grace is always there to guide us through.